Welcome, everybody. I hope folks are recharged from their holiday weekend and up for a little fireside chat that we're going to have here over the next hour. It's exciting because we get to look back at AI over 2025, make some predictions looking ahead into 2026. And then we're going to have some time to talk at the end and take on some questions in chat. Feel free to ask those questions throughout the webinar or save them for the end. There isn't an anonymous option in there if you want to ask a real spicy question, but I think we've done enough of these. They've all been asked, I think, at one point or another. So don't feel shy, but do feel free to jump in there. And if there is a thread, hopefully we can kind of combine them together and make sure everybody gets an answer to their burning questions. Just going to do quick introductions here. A little bit about Foresight Studios. We're a web design and development shop here in DC, primarily focused on working with fundraisers at nonprofits. Some of the probably the bigger nonprofits you've heard of, but we work across the entire spectrum of organization sizes. Our specialty really is on that fundraising side, with a long history working directly with engaging networks and other CRMs and CMSs. And if you're currently looking for an agency to partner with or unhappy with your current one, we'd love to talk. And we'll have contact info at the end if you want to reach out to me or my colleague here, Fernando. Fernando, would you do a quick introduction?
Thank you, Bryan. I'm Fernando Santos. I'm Director of Development at Foresight, and I work with this great team since 2016, 17. And my work here is trying to make all the promises come true in all devices, the most devices as possible. And that's it. I'm from Brazil. I moved from Brazil to the US in 2024 with my family and two cats that are still meowing in Portuguese.
And I'll give Fernando credit because Fernando also puts on his strategist hat a lot. And we're constantly talking about ways to raise more money for nonprofits. I think as much as you think it's all been done before, every week we're already coming up with new ideas, and AI is really incentivizing us to think even more broadly about what's possible. And as we start to work more with AI, there's tools like Advocacy AI that have come on the scene, and we're excited to have you, Tom. Please take a moment to tell us about Advocacy AI and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Sticking to the cat theme, I too have a cat. He will make an appearance over here at some point. Please shout out to him. His name's Harold. But otherwise, my name's Tom. I'm the founder and CEO at Advocacy AI. We're an advocacy tech platform that uses data and artificial intelligence to help nonprofits with their advocacy needs, with personalization, with a whole bunch of stuff. But I won't go on about it too much.
Sorry for flipping the slides on you there, Tom. I was just remembering we had talked about yesterday. We were each gonna kind of lay our cards on the table with how we each individually feel about AI. That I think would help make maybe some of our audience members today feel a little bit more comfortable. Tom, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. No, there's nothing I enjoy more than trashing AI. I mean, so very bluntly, I think most of and we'll cover this a bit kind of in the look back on 2025, but most of the use cases for AI are gimmicks and junk and not really that useful to anyone. And I think a lot of why I'm so excited to do this webinar is gradually, very slowly, people are coming to the realization of how AI can be useful to them and their organization. And they're deciding this is useful, and they are saying, I would like this. And as a result, we can just absolutely trash. I do my best to speak American. I sometimes say we can just trash a lot of the AI hype that has existed for the last 3 years, and really just focus on the small use cases where it is really good at just helping people and organizations with their work. But I won't trash it too much. But yeah, no, it's mostly junk. There you go.
How do you self-identify with AI?
Currently, I self-identify as a Fernando, not Bryan Casler. With AI, I like to say I am an AI hype hater. I'm not an AI hater. I like to since For years now, I've been studying like how LLMs work and where we actually use AI in our daily lives. So if you take your iPhone right now and you remember that you were seeing this cherry blossom last year and you can't find a photo in your library, if you go to your library photo and you search for cherry blossom and the phone will show you the photo of you seeing cherry blossoms, that's AI, and we have that since forever, like since a lot of years. And now we used to call Gen AI as AI, and what I don't like is when the promises doesn't match reality and doesn't match possibilities, because in the end, like when a big AI company wants VC money and they promise intelligence, it's like AGI and stuff, like investors wants to hear about intelligence, but customers wants to hear about reliability. And that's why we have a bunch of problems when driving what's being promised to the market, to live, to products.
I love that. And you made me think back to the very first time folks were like, look, a computer can identify a cat in an image. Like, wow, a cat. It's like hot dog, not hot dog. If you ever watched Silicon Valley, I'm very pro AI, but also very real about it. I'm somebody who loves new technology. I had 3 VR headsets, but very quickly realized like this is not the future. Like it's isolating. It's a stepping stone to that next thing. So it'll be fun because I am going to play facilitator today, and I'll drop in my quips. But I really want to hear from you two because I think you're the closest to it out of a lot of folks that I know. And we're gonna start off by a look back at 2025. Let me jump back over to our slides here. And I think you kind of hit it on the head, Tom. Like 90% of AI is trash, but also I think we can agree that last year AI got serious. Like there were real applications where it started to move the needle for organizations, for individuals. You started to see budgets getting allocated, and we can talk about that more looking forward to 2026. But I'd love to start with you, Tom. Just and then Fernando. What are the biggest trends you saw around AI and adoption last year?
Um, Really briefly, I think the biggest was that we're beginning to see these kind of simple custom internal tools being used. People are creating the product they want to exist, and sometimes that's just a team member doing something because it makes their life easier. I certainly know of a couple of organizations who um, just do a lot of data processing, and then someone went, "There's got to be a quick way of doing this," and they build themselves an AI-based tool to process that data for them to save themselves an enormous amount of time to go and do something more interesting with that data. And that's probably the biggest trend. Secondary to that would be that the AI platforms themselves are also making their AI more helpful. And I forget sometimes that in 2023 and 4, ChatGPT could not speak to the web. It's completely isolated. But now you can say, actually, go and find this thing for me, and it will become a bit more useful in that sense. And so those are the two big trends: is AI just narrowing down its focus and becoming more useful and customized.
Fernando, how have you seen AI evolve in 2025? I mean, you and I talk about it a lot, and I want to make sure we don't get too in the weeds. But yeah, being a
Mhm.
developer working, I think also with different types of AI that folks are probably benefiting from, but maybe not experiencing directly themselves. Yeah, what have you seen?
Things are happening so fast that I noticed in 2025 we went from not knowing what MCP was. MCP is a protocol created by Anthropic, and then we went from not knowing and not using enough to understanding enough to dislike it, because there was like a lot of performance problems, security problems, like to avoid getting too complex. MCP is just a way to connect AI to different tools. So if you, for example, if you are dealing with an AI agent and you want that agent to understand and interact with any other system, you would use MCP for that. And that all obviously it becomes clear where the security is, the problems, the data leaking, and even the performance, because a simple query can become giant in tokens and news, and then the organization ends paying a lot. In the other end, we also we have RAG. RAG is a way to search. It's retrieval augmented generation. It's a way to use AI agents or AI large language models to deal with current data or live data. So if you have, for example, your a document folder, you can create a RAG stack that will understand and talk to you, respond to your queries about those documents, those folders. And then we went from RAG to RAG 2, which is a better way, which is where things are right now. And there are a lot of open source tools that lets you deal with your own documents, your organization's knowledge, and create AI tools to work on top of that. So that's what I saw last year, and I think 2026 will make those technologies be even faster and smaller models and better performance.
Yeah, I really saw two things working, with our other strategists and watching them work with our nonprofit clients. The first is that last year was really where we started to get some of our data connected. Okay, it's got access to our email, it's got access to our Google Drive. And what you don't think about email, though, is you have all these systems that trigger notification emails like, oh, a task was updated. And we realized that, oh, even though the AI doesn't have access to our project management tool, it actually can still tell a lot about what's happening in the project management tool, almost like emails are a log of events that are happening. And so we started to get more mature in our usage of it and understanding how to get the most out of these tools. And that's one of the things I've also seen on the developer side was developers are just getting better at understanding how to use these tools. Like everyone kind of had to bootstrap themselves, right? Yes, there's courses out there, but there's a lot of learning through doing, and people finally got to do with a lot of these tools. The other thing I wanted to say was just that on calls, it's obvious now that a lot of nonprofits are using different AI tools very often in the open. Like, oh, we have a policy, we have an account with Microsoft, so we use Gemini, or sorry, what's Microsoft's? Is it ChatGPT? I don't know. There's so many now. But the point being is that our clients are openly using these, and what I've seen is that they also are interested in how we use it. So I'm seeing very like, oh, okay, like how did you, j- you know, you said you used AI to like aggregate data across reports. How did you do that? Oh, okay. You have AI in your browser, and so you opened up 10 spreadsheet tabs from Google Slides. And instead of having to export the data, you can just have the browser based AI read the data out of your different tabs. And I was like, oh, okay, now they're interested and they're kind of learning and, going to have to push organizational policy to change, what is and isn't permitted. And that's the last part is I've seen a lot of folks now have an acceptable AI use policy in place where in 2024 it was like, what does one look like? Who has one? Can we copy it? We need to get it approved. And then in 2025, to my knowledge, pretty much every nonprofit has either said we're using AI and this is our policy, or we're a no AI shop as much as we can control it, because it's just in every tool and product. So you can't control it totally, as Fernando mentioned, even with like You just go and search for something. You don't think about it, but machine learning and AI have been in our products for basically a decade at this point. Tom, I think you sit in a unique position because you have a product. Looking back at 2025, um, are there I'm very interested, like, are you getting certain questions on the sales front or from your clients about features that they want or capabilities that they want? What did that look like in over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think also, Brian, Bruce has answered your question. It's co-pilot was the word you were looking for. There you
Thank
go.
you.
It can escape us all. But no, I think absolutely last year is we saw a massive rise in people coming to us with expectations about what AI could do. And I think it's one of the best changes that we saw when we started 3 years ago. We were very much going out into the world and saying this is how AI can be useful, and there was an element of skepticism from some people. Um, I come from a background of running digital ads for nonprofits, and it's such a stark contrast. For years, the complexity of digital ads has greatly outpaced what clients are doing with digital ads. With AI now, it's often the case that organizations are actually more forward looking than the platforms and the tech that they are attempting to use to get something done. And so that people are coming on a weekly basis with just a new idea. They're like, can we do this? We understand, which is really annoying. I mean, it's great, but it's like, really? Like, so they'll see that we do something and go, oh, if you can do that, can we do this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say, it's always linked to data. No one ever comes to us and says, can we just use AI out of the context of the data they have as an organization? Which is why they're ending up building customized tools, because everybody's data is slightly different. And so uh, it's a very personal ask. Like, we have this one specific need. Can AI fix it? And often the answer is yes. And then we can go away and help them fix it. That's kind of the whole point of the game at this point. But what they're wanting is like you say, their data aggregated, their data understood, and then use AI to explain that data, use AI to make recommendations what they should do with that data, like content for people based on that data. And probably the key to that is which I think we're going to touch later on, is the concept of personalization. How do we have all this data that we've now used AI to connect? AI has explained the data. AI has made recommendations. That's great. But how do we now make that relevant to the people we're actually speaking to, whether it's to take an advocacy action or donate money? How do we personalize that for people? And those are the exact questions you should ask when you're looking at AI and data. That is the end goal, is how do you make something more effective?
We were talking in prep for this webinar about like some of the biggest challenges we're seeing, and that's kind of when we look forward to 2026, and personalization is the name of the game, right? It can be you know framed another way, which is context. So if you hear the term context in terms of prompt engineering or building effective systems, typically context is about personalization. It's about understanding. It's about giving some relevancy to the question or the data that is being processed. And Fernando, you were making some good points earlier this week when we were talking about Apple and some of the challenges that they're facing and why personalization is really still a hard problem and not a solved problem at this point.
Yeah. Mostly because mostly because we don't want to look fake, but we also don't want to be creepy. So we have those guardrails, and you need to be right in the middle. I don't know if it's just me, but if you go like to LinkedIn, it looks like almost 100% of the content creators are using AI to generate content, and it looks like it's clear that there's a struggle even for people that work with AI and talk about AI and have a deep knowledge about all those tools. It's really difficult to make AI have your voice, like to use AI to get the content and without losing your voice. And that's why social media now looks a little fake, because like the fact that the content was generated by AI, which should not be a problem. The problem is it is losing your voice. It becomes like really clear. But for organizations, I think Ton said the right thing. Like the questions you should be asking right now. I think a lot of times the companies and organizations, they start by not knowing which questions they should ask. And for example, AI discoverability. If you go to ChatGPT right now and you'd say, for example, you want to help a nonprofit that saves animals, and you want like 5 different organizations to support in your local area. Do you think AI is gonna tell about your own organization? Are you being? Do you know if ChatGPT knows that you exist? So the organizations, they should be asking those questions about discoverability, and it's not that tricky. I can even there's like a website called LLMS txt.org, which tries to propose a file format for that you can put on your website to help LLMs discover and understand the structure of your content. And if you take that proposal, because the web, the internet, we always evolve by proposing standards, and we don't know which standard is going to be accepted. But uh, like the robots.txt, the robots text file, which became a standard that that is used by all the crawlers. So when you start worrying about discoverability, and you get your content optimized for large language models, you can also adjust your pages, and you can also adjust your robots.txt to not clash with what you're trying to do for discoverability. So yeah, I think when you start asking the right questions, and you can even ask to the ChatGPT itself, you start getting the proper responses.
I love that idea of just asking ChatGPT like how to optimize for placement in in AI searches. I mean, it is still very much an emerging field. And because these tools are changing all the time, it will continue to be emerging, I think, for the foreseeable future. What we know though is content is king, context is king. A lot of probably what worked in the past is going to continue working, but things are shifting, right? We're seeing pretty steady declines for a lot of web traffic. Depending on what was sending folks to your website, they might not need to come anymore. They might be getting answers. I know, at least in my shopping patterns, like I am not viewing as many web pages with uh, with products as I used to anymore. I'm still purchasing just as much, but my patterns, my footprint on the web is changing. Tom, from
Yeah.
a product standpoint, I know you're bringing, you have clients coming with you with every hope, wish, and dream. But there's a very real data perspective there. How are you navigating that, and like what is the state of client data, and then how do you not overdo it? Like how are you like actually focusing in on what's delivering value, but also makes sense for a product that isn't just every literally everything being requested from you making it into the final.
I think it's odd because actually a lot of this conversation ends up just being about data quality, and you could remove AI um, from the equation, and you've still got a really interesting discussion about how does the data that an organization has impact um, how you can do things like better personalization, better customization, um, and better outcomes. Um, the thing that AI I think is particularly interesting is when you're looking at that personalization, you have two things. You need more tests. You need to test more, and that's a content thing. But then you also have an enormous amount more data to process, and that's a data processing thing. It's really fortunate that AI is really good at both those things. AI is really good at generating content; it can do it quickly, and AI is really good at analyzing data. With computer assisted, AI is not everything. Some of this is just a computer being clever. And so when you're looking at things like personalization, it's really important not to. It shouldn't be considered a merge field. Personalization is not, hello, Tom, I see you live in Rockville and your cat is called Harold. That's creepy. I would immediately be put off by that, even though theoretically you have all that. Well, all of you do have that data. I told you, but you shouldn't maybe lead with that. Personalization is more about what is it that is the motivating thing here? How do we structure it? What comes first? It's about that, you know, I hate to say the way, it's about having that human conversation with someone in a human way. If you knew I liked cats, you might bring up your cat. You wouldn't say, I know you have a black cat called Harold because he was in the back of your webinar. That's weird. But you might bring it up in some other context. But what that does generate is an enormous amount of data. And so personalization is really about that content generation and data processing. There are two actually just really, I know we have a Q&A session later, but there's two really interesting questions in the chat about how you make sure that the data recommendations you're getting back from AI are good. And that's actually the hardest part. If you're building a platform that is generating AI recommendations based on data, that is the hardest part, is how do you make that recommendation good? And have people who are reading it have the confidence that it's good. And the answer to that really is you just have to have just multiple fail safes to explain where it came up with that. You can't just say, oh, the AI says do this. That's helpful for no one because AI can make stuff up. You have to say, AI says this. Here's the data that indicated this. And here's where you can find that data if you do want to just download it and have someone have a look at it. And so you can then just check that. But often the proof is in the outcome. If AI says do something and you do it and it's better, that was a really good recommendation. If AI says do something and you do it and it's worse, stop doing it. And so I think, but that's actually one of the kind of the mental challenges that organizations have to get over, is they have to be a bit more willing to try things new. There has to be an element of, we're going to allow a little bit of leeway in what we've been, let's just say that you have a very precise use of language.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to bend from that, then you're just copying and pasting that language again and again, and you're going to get the same outcome again and again. You can have an enormous amount of data that just goes, yeah, if you copy and paste the same language, you get roughly the same outcome. And so yeah, I'll stop there. But that's the big challenge, is that how do you give people the confidence that the data output that is being generated from this is actually useful? And often the answer is test it.
Yeah, I think there's never been a better time to test, especially if you're just talking about copy testing. AI is such a great co-pilot. It's a lot of them can start to capture your preferred writing styles. We found folks, here use all different tools. We're not on one tool. We have kind of preferred ones, and what we find is we'll process in Perplexity or Google Studio and then bring it back, often to ChatGPT to capture our own individual voices. Like ChatGPT is the more water cooler AI that we talk with frequently, and we find that once we use some other tools to process large data sets or something and like want to get it back into our voice and our preferred writing styles, which as a company we have some guideposts for how we communicate with our clients, but as an individual we're not expected to write just like every other team member. We're expected to have our own style, and we encourage that. We encourage that. And I think I see that too, even with nonprofits, where they will have different voices, whether it's a message is coming from an executive director versus somebody in the field, working directly possibly with some of the organizational programs. There was something funny though, Tom. You and Fernando both hit on the creepy factor, and I was rewatching Die Hard last year, and in the big reveal is they know so much about Bruce Willis's character, and because back then, like, how do you know where somebody hometown
Yeah.
is, where they went to school, who their wife is, and it's like you were hitting. It's like that's the villain. You're like you named their cat. You're like, okay, if you do it wrong, you're the villain, and literally that's how we used to portray them. But now, you know, now you have to remind yourself of what permissive use of knowledge is. You wouldn't do that to their face, right? Like if that supporter showed up to their very first person in event, that the organization has thrown, and you threw out their cat name, a little too personal. You got to work your way up to it. There's got to be context and understanding before sometimes you tip your hat. But it doesn't mean you can't personalize your conversation, knowing that, for example, Tom and Fernando are cat people and Bryan is a dog person. I can kind of guide how I'm going to communicate to them based on that info without
Yeah, I
crossing
think
that line.
just to use that, I think yesterday when we were speaking, we used a different example, which we might because it's funny. But then on that kind of what your preferred animal is, I think that's a great example. If you were asking for donations to an animal shelter and you had the data that we're cat people and you're a dog person, you might choose the cat image or the dog image, and that's personalized, but it's not creepy. Now, if you used a picture of my cat, I might have some questions about where you got it. But it's not about it's really just about understanding what makes people tick and giving them something that they may tick more with, rather than using data to be weird. When it comes to things like fundraising, you know, it's the difference between looking at all the fundraising data you have and saying, oh, we know that on a holiday you're going to donate twice as much, and so this time when you come to our page, we're going to ask you for twice as much, rather than say, um, here's all the data we know about you. Can you please give us more because we know you can? That's weird. But just having that data and making a good suggestion based on it is a really effective way of getting someone to do something.
Love that. All right, it's time. We're going to transition into our next topic. But now we get to put on our caps and make some predictions about what changes we expect in the new year and what we think is going to become possible. One of the things I was flagging as much for myself as I think for everybody else, though, is there's kind of choice paralysis right now. I count myself lucky that Foresight is a small organization. We're all pretty senior in our role. We communicate pretty openly. And so we have a very promiscuous AI policy where people use what they want within the guardrails we've put in place through our policy and then share, right? What is working, what isn't working, what is changing. But I think at an organization perspective, like you're having to make purchase choices, you're having to make like real solid choices. And so I think there can be a little bit of a struggle there to pick out also among a sea of new products. Like, I mean, I was looking for something for our team and I'm just like, okay, every company was started in the last 6 months. Like, I have to be, semi consider who is that we're working with, right? And what's their background. Like, as an example, I think there's a real aversion from using Grok because of its connection to Elon Musk and the lack of guardrails that they're putting in place. And they seem very, very lackadaisical, very AI bro about it all. But on the other side, you have these big corporations that are also simultaneously scooping up every piece of publicly accessible data on the internet, whether you want it or not. And so you have all these options and all of these considerations, but like that's my big prediction is this is not going to get any better. It's going to come back to word of mouth. It's going to come back to like the old sales principles of like actually doing demos, walkthroughs of products. Where before you could kind of just be like, like, okay, we're going to go to like Azure, we're going to go to AWS. Like they're kind of vetted, mature products at that point. But with AI, everything is new and young and fast paced and moving. All right, I'm gonna flip it over to you, Fernando, for some bold predictions. What are you predicting for the coming year?
I think it's going to be a really, really big problem to figure out what to do with all the money they are going to raise with AI. Uh, Alone. I'm kidding. I think AI is gonna replace the borrowing. We will when during the end of the year last year we noticed like some situations in with different clients that were being attacked and by bots. And when you have this happening, usually your regular user suffers as well, because they will put like a captcha. They will put like you end up disrupting a little bit the regular donation experience, because you have bots attacking your platform. And this is something that you can use AI to fix. And once, I believe, once that gets fixed, the end user will not even realize. So I think we will see more and more AI replacing the borrowing, working in the back to avoid fraud, to replace captcha. Why do we have captcha in 2026 if AI is all that beautiful thing that can differ humans from computers? Right? We should not need captcha in 2026. And so, yeah, to fraud, profiling, user understanding your users, we will see a lot of more AI on tools that helps you with those things. Muted, you're muted again.
I love the idea of replacing the boring. That is definitely one of the things we've already found. I found, everybody's pretty cool with AI note takers, except for organizations that are really worried about subpoenas. So you get an AI note taker and you still take notes, but then enrich your notes at the end with the chat transcript. Oh my God. That was the boring part, right? Like getting that draft put together and then finalizing it. That is so much better now. And I just want to encourage folks throwing questions in the chat. I'm also capturing them in the last slide. So once we're done here, we're going to have about a little more than 10 minutes to walk through your questions. So please keep dropping them in there, and I'm collecting them as we go.
I'm talking about the boring and the creepy. The other day, I was using Claude to help me with documentation generation. I know, like for the development part, using AI to help with documentation, it has been like the best thing ever, because now you have better documentation. Developers usually are lazy on that part, and I was using Claude to help me creating a documentation and for a project. And in the end, Claude said no EM dashes were used. And I was like, what? How do you know? How do you know I don't like EM dashes? ChatGPT is the one who knows that. And then I forgot that I used ChatGPT to give me the prompt for the documentation. And ChatGPT knows that I don't like EM dashes. So ChatGPT gave the prompt with "you should not use EM dashes," and without reading properly, I pasted on into Claude, and I got the documentation. And I was like, "Wow!" Like it was like a creepy moment, because of for a second I thought Claude understood by my behavior that I don't like EM dashes.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. Tom, looking at the year ahead, I think also you often, has been the case in this webinar, you have a unique perspective because I think you sit in a different position than us. What are you predicting for 2026?
So yeah, I mean, I think actually, and I know that we have a Q&A session, but Steve asked a question a while ago about people with minimal resources. But actually, those are often the more interesting use cases, because a lot of the way in which AI is useful is it comes out of need. You don't have a developer team to go to, you don't have a data scientist team to go to say, please understand this data. And so, how did he word it? Yeah, the accidental techie. I have been the accidental techie in every organization I've ever worked at. I'm now the head accidental techie. But we need to do something. We don't have the resources to do it. Let's come up with an AI solution that will help. The best use case for that is that Excel data processing. Going into Excel and coming up with the exact formula you need to make first name, last name match is really boring. and it's really common. The formula to extract addresses to format it in the exact way you need to upload it into Salesforce, let's say, because you have it as a single string, is really boring. But AI can come up with that formula for you based on the structure of your data in about 2 seconds. And then that just saves an enormous amount of time. And so if you have an accidental techie, just go and encourage that and get them to become the AI solutions custom tool maker. And you will find that you can just do an awful lot. One of the things I like to say about AI is that really all it should be there for is to allow humans to be more human. And which is again, just another way of saying, let's get rid of the boring. A human should not sit in front of a screen and pull their hair out because their Excel formula is not working. They should go and do something with the data once that has been formatted by AI. On a slightly more self-serving note, I'll also say that in addition to individuals and organizations coming up with much more customized, very specific tools powered by AI kind of use cases, is that platforms like mine will have to begin to generate more customization, more and develop more tools for organizations at a pace that hasn't been possible before. I think it's actually, I think one of the frustrations that people have when they come to us is that there are a handful of really big players in this kind of space. And without naming names, some have been a little bit slow to adopt AI and data in the way that people need it to be adopted. And that could change because AI is now, as Fernando said, able to really help developers develop stuff. And so it should be possible that the tools will begin to catch up with what organizations and individuals are requesting of them, mine included, and the others out there. And so I think those, is really specific use cases for AI is going to be the story of 2026. If we make it to the end of the year, which actually, again, it's just, that's my main concern right now. It's just, let's just try and get to 2027. And then
Oh, man.
that's good.
I had a very unique moment in the last year that both was a look back and a look ahead, which is I went full circle in terms of some code that I was working on. I kind of got my start, like you can think like professionally doing coding, doing VBA scripts, Visual Basic scripts for Microsoft Office products way, way back in the day, like 20 years ago. And last year, a client had a request that was a very complicated report. Basically, they were able to pull this massive data set and they wanted some aggregate data to come out of it. And they're like, can you build a custom database? Can you do this? And I was just like, man, a VB script would solve all of this, but I haven't coded VB in 20 years. Well, guess what? AI had coded it for me, thousands of lines of code, lots of testing. And in the end, this was something that would usually take them a couple days to like process, and they do it every few months as their data set updated. And now the script runs in under a second. You hit a button and it's done. And it was like, could we have built a microservice and all this? And like, yeah, or I just had the idea and I literally felt like that young developer again that was just figuring out how to make it happen for an organization. And I think it's an exciting time because you don't need to be a developer to do development again. I think you need to be very conscious about the fact that AI can lie to you, that AI, you're going to be accountable for what it produces. But I'm seeing a lot of non-developers, non-programmers start to do things like that, produce landing pages, produce these types of scripts, and produce things just for their need. Like, I think that's another big thing is you don't have to always solve things for everybody. You can solve it just for you.
Yep.
I run, as an example, I run Tamper Monkey in my browser, which allows me to run JavaScript on any web page. And sometimes I find something about a website annoying. And so I tell AI it, I work through it, I create a custom JavaScript, and now it loads on the page and it solves this one annoying thing just for me. And literally, one of those annoying things is that Fathom, if you're not the account that runs the meeting, you can get the transcript, but the copy transcript button doesn't show up. So guess what? I had AI create me a button that copies the transcript.
on that.
You think you could scroll and copy it. That's not how their scrolling works. It's lazy loaded and stuff. But it was like, oh, like we go all the way back though to those custom solutions. You can solve stuff for yourself, for your team, your unique use cases. And I think that's the perfect segue, Tom, that you already did, which is into some of our questions. So let's get into those with 10 minutes left.
Can
And
I?
I got yeah.
I've been reading. There's an anonymous question, and I'd be very pleased if someone could claim that question because it's great. Because it really strikes that. Sorry. Yeah, it's a fundamental question. If we're saying AI can produce more content and do your data processing for you, the person who is responsible for writing content and doing the data process, what on earth do they do with their time? It kind of is the fundamental. Thank you. So it might not be Maya. She might have just claimed it wanting to be seen as intelligent. But either way, we're going to say it's true. But it's a fantastic question. But I think it comes back to what I said earlier: is that AI and computers are not human. They're never going to be human. No matter how clever they get, they're always going to be a little bit robotic. What humans should do is do the human stuff, the decision making, the analyzing, the understanding the nuance of how to speak to a person. And so to try and come up without going into crazy levels of detail, the direct question is, what does the person do with all that free time? They get to think about new things they can do because they have all this data. So, for example, let's say you have, we'll go back to the cats and dogs. If suddenly you realize you have data you never had before, and you've connected that all your major donors are cat people, it's an unlikely thing to happen, but it might be. You can then, the person who would have spent a week figuring that out now knows it in 10 seconds and can spend the week going, we've learned a really key insight about our donors. What do we do with that information? How do we maximize that? Let's do and then they can begin to generate ideas, and then get the AI to help implement those ideas. And so it kind of leaks into Steve's question right at the start about what do small teams do? Small teams just build capacity because they have all the boring stuff sorted. They can use the capacity they do have to do the human stuff, the talking to people and the generating really unique ideas. Because AI, clever it might be, is not the best unique idea generator on the planet and never will be. And so that's an attempt to answer that. So hopefully May might have answered that question, or whoever asked. We don't know.
Well, I'm going to use that as a springboard, Tom, because you said, they're not idea generators. And I actually think that's a great way, that's not complex and an interesting tactic that you can use to help produce landing pages and advocacy campaigns, which is, I don't know about you, but sometimes I sit down and I got a blank document and I got to put words on paper and I struggle. Typically don't struggle with is talking to other people about the same thing, or sometimes just talking out loud. And so one of the flows that I've developed for myself is when I get stuck, I will spin up a Zoom meeting and have my AI note taker join, and I just pretend I'm talking to someone else, presenting about X, Y, and Z. And it works great. Sometimes I'll get stuck there, or I just find like I need to go for a walk. Well, I can do the same thing on my phone as long as I get a transcript out of it at the end. The ums, the ahs, the long pauses, totally fine. It's about the volume. So I go for an hour walk. I talk for an hour about an idea. Maybe it's a product idea, a pivot in our work. It's something a campaign I want to pitch to our clients. Then I come back, I have that rich transcript. I take any other notes I have, and then I start working with AI to kind of mold it and shape it. And I think of that as the raw materials is like I externalize what was in my brain. And that's all I need to do to then get some momentum. But like that little push start, that hump to get over has been something that I encountered constantly throughout my entire professional career of just like this one thing I'm stuck. Like, even though I love it, I'm interested in it, whatever it is, I can't get over it. I can't get over it. And this has absolutely solved that for me. So the big part was self-identifying when I hit those moments and then be like, boom, I have a cure-all for this now. And it's been a game changer. So I think that's something that works no matter your scale or size. And if you're somebody that encounters that type of thing in your work, give it a try. I would love to hear if it works out for you. We got a couple other questions in chat. What systems procedures do you have in place to check that the accuracy of AI? I think we were talking about that. I think one thing to say is that, you are accountable. So I think accountability, like if you want to build a culture of using AI, it can't be that AI Jesus take the wheel and that, hey, we're not going to use AI until it's infallible, right? You're going to miss the boat. It's going to be too late for you. What you need though is accountability. And, we have that in a technical sense when we do development, like we have a very rigorous QA process. And you can start to get lax though if you do the same thing over and over and hey, it's right 9 out of 10 times. But are you gonna let your guard down? Like, what is your operational security? Are you writing something that's just internal and it's not the worst if something's inaccurate? Or are you writing something important like a colleague's performance review or that letter from the executive director and you're putting words in their mouth? I think they're just like passwords, right? Your password for, I don't know, some stupid little game is probably does not need to be as secure as your password for your bank. In theory, you should use a password manager and they should all be secure. But there's different levels of importance there. And I think different levels of scrutiny when it comes to AI. Yeah, I see you chomping at the bit, Tom. Please jump in.
Sorry, I know we've only got 5 minutes left, but there's a I think a perfect question. How can you talk about the environmental impact and implications of water, energy, and higher bills from AI use and data center expansion? How can you use AI ethically without destroying the planet? Is just the perfect question, and a lot of that comes down to um, uh, a lot of the AI just being junk, but really understanding what is causing those problems. So to give some examples, if uh, it's all about how much you're actually using that data center. And so you could easily, we've talked about Excels and merging Excels. You could just give all your Excel sheets to an AI and say, fix it. And that's going to use an enormous amount of processing power. Or you could say, can I have a script? Like Bryan said, can I have a script just so I can just do it by myself? And it generates that much code. And then you can just do it yourself for the rest of your life. And so you've barely used AI. AI's been that kind of kernel, but then you never need to go back to the data center ever again. I learned a really fascinating fact yesterday about the difference in what is causing the water and the data processing. If I ask ChatGPT a question and it spits out a paragraph, that's about the energy use of running a light bulb for about a second. So it's not thumbs up light bulbs. But and so that's not a huge amount. If I ask it to generate an image, that's enough energy to power a laptop for 30 minutes. That is not that is a difference. And so if you really don't want to use AI, reuse AI and kind of contribute to the water use and the energy use, don't use AI for image generation. Certainly don't use it for video generation because it is an enormous user of power. And then it just comes back to the AI is not there to fix all your problems. It's there to help you. And so, and this is what we do. We don't use AI in the sense that we're going off to LLMs and asking it to generate a huge amount of stuff. We're building tools to allow people to do stuff themselves. And so you use AI once and then you can just go, no, thank you. And there's obviously a sliding scale between the one extreme and the please generate a movie, which would be an enormous amount of power. There's a sliding scale and you can just decide where you're happy with that. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question, but it's a great one to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of cool things we're doing with AI too that I think are hard to quantify the value. We had a project this year that uh, worked on sentiment analysis for user submitted comments on memorial pages. Anyone could submit a comment, and the problem was that most of these memorial pages were around someone who died due to drug addiction, and so you couldn't use common keywords to like flag. It was very gray, and some people did not act in good faith. And what you would see is that it was really down to a judgment call. And so we used AI to initially flag sentiment analysis, and it pretty much solved the problem for this organization where a human was having to do initially that emotional labor to just find people that were trashing, unfortunately, on somebody's memoriam page. And that's a game changer, right? Like it may be labor or power intensive, but also at the same time, what is worth protecting your staff and your team. Like there are other things that AI are good for that aren't just spreadsheets. There's a human component that it can also really, really help with. Speaking of the human component, I just want to thank Fernando and Tom for joining today, and to thank you to everybody who is on the webinar. The last thing I want to do is just share our contact information. Hopefully, you already have it, but if not, please feel free to screenshot this, and we'll also be following up with everybody after the call to make sure you have a link to this video. If you have burning AI questions, do not hesitate to reach out. We love talking about this stuff. We literally could spend the whole day chatting your ears off, and we would be happy to do that. So please get in touch, and we look forward to having you join our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.